This episode with Serendipity Day has been a couple years in the making. Once I decided it was time to record and release this episode, wow, like I felt like I can't wait any longer, and I felt a real sense of urgency to share this with all of you. So we get into a lot of points of shame and embarrassment, more so in the bonus content, actually. So I just want to say that while listening to this episode, if you are feeling any degree of embarrassment or shame for having participated in an online or in-person space, group, multi-level marketing company that exhibit some or all of the 12 red flags that we get into, just know that we get it and you're not alone. And in the bonus of this episode, bonus content, yes, I'm now doing bonus content, which you can access in the episode show notes. There's a link to my Substack. So yeah, in that bonus content, Dipiti talks about her intentions for joining a BDSM community. I discuss my intentions for joining radical feminist groups and birth liberation groups, how I managed to avoid moving to an in-person community of, quote, like-minded women, the subtle process of loyalty becoming a currency and favoritism within groups. Dipiti and I shed light on why we won't be returning to certain festivals and women's spaces. What happens when storytelling is used to threaten members and students? We ask the question, is radical feminism a cult? We talk about self-responsibility and victim consciousness and how these frameworks can be weaponized. How having a shared experience of losing friends and being ostracized for knowing what a woman is isn't necessarily a strong enough foundation for a lasting friendship. How participating in MLMs creates an extraction lens on everyone you meet, aka new connections are prioritized based on them becoming your potential downline. Money, money, money. How we deal with the guilt and shame of having promoted groups, companies, and influencers we are no longer affiliated with. The role that therapy has played after exiting these culty spaces and narc abuse recovery coaches. How constantly trying to get to the root of things became a disability and an inability to see the bigger picture that warped our sense of reality. And finally, breaking the bubble of the fictional us, noticing exit patterns of former members in various online and in-person groups. Now, that list that I just read out is all covered exclusively in the bonus to this episode. I did my very best to squeeze as much as possible into this published free episode. So without further ado, let's get into it. This episode we would love for women to use as a kind of starting point for vetting potential groups that maybe on the surface look really, really awesome and shiny and wonderful. So this episode is going to be a point by point red flags for women to look out for before joining both in-person and online spaces. In my kind of niche of Instagram, I've been overwhelmed by the number of new online communities that are popping up. And as I've watched the new communities pop up and been in many of these both in-person and online spaces myself, I'm starting to pick up on different themes and red flags. And I couldn't think of anyone better to have this conversation with than Serendipity Day. I don't know anyone of my contemporary, my peer group, who has been in more women's spaces than you, Dipiti. And I also just want to note for let's say this is your first time listening to Whose Body Is It podcast episode, or perhaps your first time hearing Serendipity Day speak, we have both traversed the most liberal, unquote, progressive of spaces to some of the most radically minded spaces. And say everything in between when it comes to women's health, wellness, bodily sovereignty, medical freedom, trans ideology, pro-sex spaces, pro-sex work spaces. So that is a bit about where we are coming from in terms of the different groups that we have been a part of. And we've certainly overlapped in a couple of these groups. And I've been in groups that you haven't been in, you've been in groups and I haven't been in. So that is where we are pulling this episode from. So thank you, Dipiti, for doing this episode with me.
Thank you so much for having me on again. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, and I just want to plug one of our previous episodes talking about BDSM spaces and actually talking about a women's festival that we attended together. In the bonus for this episode, Dipiti and I are going to be talking about why we wouldn't go back to some of these festivals and our intentions of involvement when we joined some of these both online and in-person spaces. So that is all going to be in the bonus. So I think we should just dive in.
Yeah, let's do it. I think it's just fair to let everyone know I am very nervous, like having this like my nerves, it's like a tingly sensation of like, what are people that I know gonna think of me? What are people that I don't care what they think of me gonna think of me? But it's still there. And I love coming and talking with you and your audience. And I think it's only fair to say that this is a nerve-wracking episode because you're right. Like, I have been in so many women's communities, and in the last, decade, I have really, put my heart and soul and energy into curating and creating and helping women's communities. And I know that there's so many women that personally know me that are going to listen to this. And I'm really here to speak to women that maybe have seen, like, yeah, this aesthetically pleasing radical feminism. And they're like, I've always wanted to see what these communities are like. And so I'm doing this to make sure you have a good list of like things to watch out for before putting your heart and soul and all of your energy into something.
Yes, and potentially money, hundreds
Yes.
of dollars potentially or thousands. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Yeah.
So we're going to start with the most obvious one, which is red flag when joining a women's group if they are letting in men, right? If they are advertising it as a women's group, but are actually letting in men, that is a red flag that they are lying, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a problem if you want to join a group where they are explicitly saying that there are, quote, trans women or non-binary men, or they just call them plain men. You like make that choice. But if it's not actually a women's group and you are told that it is, that's the promising of one thing, Dipity, as you said as we were getting ready for this call. It's like the problem is the promising the one thing and then delivering something else. So that's our first one. And Dipity, you wanted to in preparing for this episode, you had mentioned the parameters of what women's land is. Like, can you speak more to like women's land with all women versus a woman's festival with men on the land?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, there's many women's festivals out there that are advertised as women's only spaces, and then they say that they're inclusive to men. And they might not say to men, they might say trans women or non-binary, or, anyone who wants to call themselves or identify as a woman. And I actually think that that is less like gross, and like it seems like less of a lie than women's festivals that have the festival going and then they're like, oh, I have all men except for my Nigel, right? All men except for my husband that's going to come and do the repairs, that's going to come, like, oh, none of these women know that this man is my husband or that this man is one of the workers' husbands. And we're just gonna, they paid to be here and they should just know that they're safe. Like that's a red flag for sure. And men is a very obvious one, but what else are these groups promising that once you join, once you get in, it's actually backwards. It's actually, not what they promised. It's actually like a fire fest,
Right, right, right. Totally. Yeah, such an important one. And, if you're unclear about this, please do not hesitate to email the organizers of an event or
Mhm.
of a festival and ask really specific questions. It's better to know before you hand over your money and get pay for a non-refundable ticket and fly to wherever you're going to only find out that this is actually not what you signed up for,
Mhm.
and maybe you would have spent your money somewhere else. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask these questions.
Yeah, I also think it's fair that if you and a group of women are planning on going to a festival this year, and you do know that it is inclusive of men, sending the organizers an email and being like, "Hey, I'm really looking forward to going to your festival, and I think it's like it sucks that it's a co-ed festival, and I wish that we had more women only spaces," because I think that it's definitely going out of fad these days. And maybe the organizers, if they get enough emails, they'll be like, "Oh, this is what women want." It's not. We don't need to use all of this inclusive language. We don't need to include men in our spaces anymore. Like this is
Hmm.
what our audience is asking for.
Right, right, totally. That's a great tip. Number two, there's one person at the top. Okay, and this is a really tricky one. We weren't sure whether to include this, but what we mean by one person at the top, there's not only one person at the top, but there is no board, there's no real team, right? There's no infrastructure for any kind of checks and balances,
Mhm.
right? Why do you think this is a problem, Dipiti?
I mean, the obvious problem is that it allows the leader to lack accountability. It allows the leader to be the, what I say goes. And I think that, that puts a lot of extra stress on the whole entire organization. Not to say that women's circles should be run like businesses or the government or anything. And I think that this is part of the reason they're like, "Oh, we're not businesses and we're not a government, we're women's circles." But it's to figure out how a group is going to make decisions is very tricky. The what I've seen is, sometimes you have a board, that is legally a trust where every woman's name is part of that trust. And whoever woman's name is part of that trust is the ones that are making the decision. But in any situation that I've ever seen like that, it still gets catty. People on the board still, take sides and conspire against each other. And I've never seen like a consensus work. And so I actually came to radical feminism from anarchism. And I was an anarchist, communist, socialist. I found anarchism at 19. And I have traveled to anarchist communities from places in Africa to places in Europe to places in, like Slab City in California. So I've been to a lot of established organizations that claim anarchism. And I've never seen a consensus actually do its job as, a group of women or a group of people making decisions for the bigger group as a whole. And so I know that we're like, "Oh, like look out for when it's just one person." But even if they describe themselves as consensus based, there's normally a leader. There's
Hmm.
normally one person who owns the land, right? And so they're going to have a lot more sway than the people whose names aren't on the land, right? Or there's normally one person that everyone kind of looks up to, right? And so that's pretty easy to spot. And if it's just an online community, it might be a little harder to spot. But once you pay attention to like the inner workings of decision making, of the figuring out their moral compass, it'll be quite evident of like who's at the top and how they use their power.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And so, even I've seen leaders that like they say that they don't want to make any decisions and until it's something that they care about. I've seen leaders that openly admit that like, no, I am the brand, I am the one that's behind it, this is my name, this is, like I am the final decision of everything. And so I think the red flag for where I think is the most important place to look is when there is one leader, how open is she to criticism? How open is she to being told that, maybe she hurt somebody and she has to make up for something that she did? Or maybe, the decision she made about something didn't help everyone. How does she handle that? When like we're all human, we all make mistakes. When leadership makes mistakes, how is that addressed?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How is it when the leader hurts another woman's feelings, right? Like just as simple as that. Can you talk to her about it? Or like does it become a big dramatic thing? How have you ever witnessed the leader say an apology, and what did that look like and what was it for? you
Mm-hmm.
know and so that really goes into like I think that there's a lot of false vulnerability that we see in women's circles, that they might share things that feel really vulnerable but are just surface level. I don't think that in this podcast we can cover like, oh, how to discern what's surface level and what's deeper than that. But I think that I'm still, it's like, it's been a lifelong journey for me of figuring out like, false flags, red flags, and, just like, are they lying to me? Are they sitting here crying, being vulnerable? And is it actually a lie? Like,
Mm-hmm.
is it a facade? Like, is it being used to get my guard down, so that I'm then vulnerable?
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like trying to establish some kind of peer relationship when
Mhm.
the distribution of power is actually really unbalanced.
That's a perfect way of saying that. Exactly.
And I think also just on like a practical level, like what would happen, like if there's a major event or conference festival coming up and that one leader falls ill, like what what happens when that is the case? If there's only one person who understands like everything that's supposed to go down, um, or one person is responsible for production, then how would that look if that one person fell ill or yeah, just couldn't kind of
Mhm.
function optimally? What would happen to the rest of the event?
And I know that like every single organization that we're talking about, their response to this question would be like, "Oh, we've got it covered." Like,
Mm.
"Oh, of course." Like, but I think that when I think of it, what they mean is that they would still have to be on the phone. So not even like fell ill, but like, what if they were, like in a position where they were unreachable? Like, would the event
Mm.
still happen, or
Hmm.
would the group like stay together? And it's interesting because, like, I know that business coaches talk about this a lot, right? With their businesses. Like, are you running a business that will fall apart if you get sick? Are you running a business that will completely collapse if you don't show up to work for 2 weeks, or if you are unreachable, if you go on vacation, right? And so, like, I do think that that is applicable here. I was kind of going on a tangent about yeah, everything. But yeah, to circle around to businesses and the government, like they have checks and balances. Like good, successful businesses have like a board of trustees and, like all of these things that like are in place to have checks and balances, right? Now, whether or not those are applicated or like actually usable and or just like said that they're there is a different question, but like that's why in women's circles, like, look at it. If they say that they're consensus based, where are the clicks with the women in consensus, right? I almost promise you that there is going to be a top woman and a bottom woman on that consensus board, right? And so,
Hmm.
how is that bottom woman treated by her peers? When she has a concern, who does she go to? Because it's probably not going to be the top one, you know?
Hmm.
And so, yeah, there's never been a consensus board that I've ever seen that didn't have click. And I know that there are people that are my friends that are going to listen to that and be like, but what about ours? You didn't mean this one, did you? And I'm gonna just be like, come on, look, like, of course like, of course I mean you. Of
Yeah.
course, like, yeah, like every single one that I've ever seen in my life has clicks. And those clicks absolutely influence how they are making decisions for the group overall.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think women who are starting their own groups, their own communities might think, well, I'm super ethical, or like this would never happen to me,
Mhm.
or I would never fall into this trap of abuse of power, or fill in the blank, or put my members in a vulnerable situation. But yeah, this is exactly why we're doing this episode, because it's not like a us versus them. This is like a part of human behavior that we have to consider and deal with, like the unpredictability of human behavior in some senses, and also the very predictable things that we're going to get into. Um, Speaking of predictable, number three. Oh my gosh, I have so much to say about this one. The person or people at the top of the organization participate in multi-level marketing.
Mhm.
Just know that you will always be a downline first and a sister second.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
MLMs are the filter in which you like see people, and I really stand by that, and I say that as someone who participated in a multi-level marketing company for about a month. That was in 2018, 2017. I was selling essential oils through Young Living. And I remember the switch. It was a switch where
Mhm.
all of a sudden, all my friends, like hanging out with a bunch of friends, was a new opportunity to share the product, which is a euphemism for getting downlines, right? And all of a sudden, the
Mhm.
product is like can fix everything and do everything in it. I would find ways to insert it in conversation and slip it in, and I
Mhm.
and I genuinely thought I was like going to be the face of like holistic healing and spread this goodness to my peer group. And I just remember that switch and feeling like really weird. Like I remember just thinking like I'm not just going to hang out with a friend. I'm going to hang out with a friend with an essential oil roller that I'd made with like a carrier oil in my bag, and I was just going to take it out very casually. And I just like it was it's so creepy to think about in retrospect. And then all of also this is all only clear in retrospect. And I only did this
Mhm.
just to clarify, I only did this for about a month, and I was wildly unsuccessful. I collected zero downlines. I think my mom bought a set just to like support me, even though she really did
Mhm.
not support this venture. She was torn because she wanted to support me in whatever I was doing. So, yeah, just know that if you are joining an in-person or online community and the people who run it are MLMers, they will coerce you into becoming their downline.
Mhm.
That's it.
It it is a very big red flag for me if the leader or leaders, everyone in their life has paid them before, like, as an entry. So like they don't have anything to do with anyone, or they're not, they might be like warm and customer service, like they might do customer service with people, but until you pay them, you have no chance of friendship.
Mm.
Right? You have no chance of like being in the group or in the inner circle. And it's interesting because it's clouded with like, oh, it's a two-way street. Like, oh, they paid me first, but now I'm making them money too. And so yeah, if the only friends that people have, or that women have like there's money getting exchanged, like that is such a huge red flag to me.
Mm.
Like if you are a businesswoman and you're like, oh, this is, like, oh no, I've made all of my friends buy from me. Like, yeah, like red flag, right? Like, I think it is so incredibly important to have friendships in our life that money is not exchanged. And, some people are going to say, like, oh, that's just a value you have. And I don't know. I might not have all of might not be articulate enough to say exactly like why it feels so manipulative and so sticky, but it is one of the biggest red flags that I see out there.
Yeah, thank you for expanding on that. That's such a good distinction, right? Not only like a MLM situation, but where the intimacy cannot be fostered unless there is an
Mhm.
exchange of money.
And this, I love what you said at the beginning of this episode, loyalty as currency, you know? And like, I think that that's where it starts. It's like, oh, well, like I have to make a deposit into this women's bank in order so that the leader knows that I'm loyal to her. It's like the first like step is like, oh, I'm going to buy a course, or I'm going to enter into the, paid membership, or I'm going to go to their school, or do whatever it is that they are selling. And it's like, if you know that you have to do that in order to become their friend, like if your goal is friendship and not necessarily knowledge,
Mhm.
that's a red flag.
Like I've seen recently marketing for a newer online community where it's like sisterhood, 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 but it's, like what are they selling versus what you're getting? Like if someone is being explicit, you pay to get these particular business resources and information, and this is a knowledge-based program, but conflating sisterhood with recurring payments and payment plans and
Mm-hmm.
expectation of becoming a downline and buying all the affiliate products that are plugged, that's something different. So like whatever you're signing up for, and maybe you want to join a space where women are vetting lots of products and you're using that space to read their testimonials and understand how the products work and yada yada yada, and that's why you're joining. But making the distinction with
Mm-hmm.
clarifying your intention and what you think you're getting before signing up. I think getting really clear about that. I can look back on different spaces and even getting involved with Young Living. I definitely saw it as a way to make money, and I saw other doulas who were saying that they were making money. Now, were they actually making money from
Mm-hmm.
it? I highly doubt it. But it was something that
Yeah.
was advertised to me and sold to me as something super complementary to what I was already doing, and I could just seamlessly integrated into what I was already doing. And the few times that I like set up diffusers for like my childbirth education classes, like it did not go well. And I actually even had
Mm-hmm.
when I used to have a Google Business Review page, wrote a review that was like, beware, she participates in a pyramid scheme. And my parents warned me, like, you only have one reputation and do not get involved in this. This is like a really bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to hear it.
Something you just said, I want to go off of that. Okay. Money they said that they are making, right? Do not believe people when they say that they have a bunch of money. Like you do not know unless you are like their accountant and you are doing their taxes. Do not think that all of these influencers have their shit together as much as they make it seem online, especially the women that are like, oh, female center or like what feminine business skills or like,
Hmm.
I'll teach you how to make $1 million by using, your feminine energy and not stepping into your masculine.
Yeah.
Like we do not know other people's financial situations. So, unless you are their accountant and you are doing their taxes, you do
Hmm.
not actually know if their lifestyle is, is actually, making them money, or, it might just be running up credit card debts. It might just be getting themselves into one situation after another that, is it's going to tip them over one day. Like we do not know if these influencers actually have, their life together in the way that they present it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in my experience, most of them don't. In my experience, most of, I'm not just talking about one group or one woman. Like most of the women I know that run women's communities are severely in debt.
Wow. That brings us to actually number four, which is a bit of a expansion on number three, which is, any one another red flag, like any group that promises to help you quantum leap your money goals
Mm-hmm.
by using quote quantum technology or quote money energetics, right? Especially when they're promising high reward for little work. Sometimes this is
Mm-hmm.
phrased as jumping timelines, jumping money timelines, and we don't want to diminish the subconscious work that can be done around, you know, um, understanding money and understanding wealth and understanding market value, right? There is a lot of understanding that one and knowledge that one
Mm-hmm.
can seek to improve their financial situation, but to imply that you can do something like this overnight is something to, yeah, to be skeptical of. There is no way to bypass hard work, tedious tasks, research. There's just no way to get around it. Like maybe you do it for a few years and then you are successful enough to hire a team and delegate all those tasks and then you're able to really scale your business. Sure, but to imply that you can, put like $1,000 up front and turn it into 1 million or some kind of
Mm-hmm.
outrageous leap.
Well,
Uh
and unfortunately, many of these classes are not $1,000; they're five thousand
right, that
dollars.
would be a
When,
bargain.
yeah, if you're spending somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 for on a 6-week course, and by the end of the 6-week course, you're supposed to be a millionaire, that's a red flag.
Yeah. And like it could be true that you do invest that amount of money and you have a high reward, but I would guess that it's because you actually applied all of the
Mm-hmm.
practical tools that were shared with you. And so before getting into any kind of feminine, energetic money situation, like I would want to know, what are you actually teaching me? Are you going to teach me how to
Mm-hmm.
use Google and Facebook ads? Are you teaching me how to use Excel? Are you
Mm-hmm.
teaching me like the basics of budgeting? Are you giving me a breakdown of different subscriptions and how to keep my overhead low? Are you teaching me how to copyright? Like, what are the practical tools that you are teaching in this course to
Mm-hmm.
help me achieve that goal? Right? Like, rather than purely focusing on lighting a candle at your altar each
Hmm.
night before bed, which I don't mean to diminish, but that alone is no, not going to make you a millionaire.
And I know for me it's tricky because like I see these classes and I'm like, oh wow, this marketing is really working on me, and I get really excited and I get all of those feel goods. And then you hear like the testimonials and like there's hand-picked women that give their testimonials. And being on the business side, I have seen women in business make up more testimonials than not,
Mm,
especially for newer products.
hmm
And so I'm not accusing anyone of doing anything like that, but I'm just saying that if you are looking at testimonials on the web page that you are buying from, maybe try it. Like, if it is a significant investment for you that you are considering, look elsewhere too. Like search past students, see if you can get a hold of actual people to talk to, and look for those 1-star reviews. Look for those women that are like, oh, this class didn't teach me anything. Oh, when halfway through the course, half of us confronted the teachers and were like, hey, you're not teaching us anything, and then they got kicked out. Like
right.
really, I hate to be the person that's like assume for the worst and expect the best, but like I really do move through life like that. And when there is a big investment to be made, I do my research and I like keep my ears open for
hmm
criticism and I keep my ears open for disgruntled, past students. And, sometimes their concerns are valid and sometimes I'm like, oh, you are, maybe this class wasn't a good fit for you.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but then that goes into what another red flag of like looking at exiting patterns.
Wait, we're gonna get to that. I know we're really eager to get to root. We're
I
gonna
know.
let's try to keep to the list because we have a
Okay.
lot. I naively thought, oh, we'll go it'll sound good, Dippity. We'll do an episode that's like top five written. And I'm like, oh my God, we have 12. We have 12
Yeah.
and we have a lot more to talk about in the bonus.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna get to that very important one.
Mhm.
Um, in terms of, yeah, I just want to make a note on like promises, whether it's the quantum leaping your money or money energetics or however it's being marketed to you. Um, I think it's amazing that there are so many ways to learn sales and marketing,
Mhm.
but so many more people know how to sell and market, but don't know how to actually deliver like the bread and
Mhm.
butter, or the meat of the program.
Yes.
So just because you're being sold to very successfully and you're impressed by the marketing of a program, conference, festival, fill in the blank, online community, in-person community, does not reflect the value of what is inside, which is why vague copywriting in terms of what you're going to actually get and what is included in the
Mhm.
program. Look out for that. I cannot tell you how many women have come to me and said, um, I saw you follow this account. She's, hosting this program coming up. What do you think? And then the woman tells me like what she's looking for, right? Well, like what she actually needs. And we do like a comparison. Okay, well, this is what appealed to you about this marketing, but maybe you just want to learn how to market. And this woman is
Mhm.
marketing to you to teach you how to, let's just say, do ceramics. But you're
Yeah.
actually not interested in learning ceramics. You're attracted to her because she's good at sales and marketing. It's like you need to take a sales and marketing class, not a ceramics class, right?
Mhm.
And so, yeah, so just identifying like what is appealing to you about the marketing, and if you're just trying to be your own good marketer and salesperson for your own stuff, or if you actually can isolate what is going to be taught and you actually want to learn the things that they are saying that they are going to teach you within that course. Also, I just feel
I
like every course on Instagram is just like how to sell stuff, but it's like
Mhm.
who's teaching the actual skills? Like everyone is just like learning how to teach other people how to sell stuff. Like who are the
Hmm.
people who are actually teaching midwifery? Who are the people who are actually teaching life skills? I feel like everything, like everyone is just not everyone, but I feel I'm seeing more and more women who started off with a non-sales and marketing offer who has pivoted to sales marketing. And
Hmm.
I did a version of this. Like I did one course called content and confidence because women asked me like how do you do what you do? What do you like? What are some things you would recommend? And
Hmm.
I did a course on that, but that didn't become my whole venture. So look out for that.
Yeah. And I've fallen into this trap so many times where I see an influencer and I see their life and I'm like, I think that they'd be a really good friend. I think that they'd be a really interesting person to have in my life, to have like, in my phone so that I can call and talk to every once in a while. And so then I buy their course to not learn any skills that I'm actually interested in, but just to
Mm.
get into their good graces or, join their
Mhm.
community or whatever. And then, and I do tend to be a more charismatic person. And so I do end up becoming friends quite easily with people. But it's like, I knew that, like, oh, I need to give them money first, you know?
It was like kind of
And,
you're saying it was a bit no one said, "Hey, to be my friend, you have to pay me," but there was just more unspoken. Like you saw,
mm-hmm,
like what I'm hearing you say, and I've had this experience too, where you look at the other women and you're like, how did they get
mm-hmm,
in? And you notice a pattern and you're like,
yes,
oh, I have to, my show my loyalty by
mm-hmm,
paying for
exactly,
something. And then you get the in.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't always look like buying a course or like it could look like sharing a particular thing online. Like,
Mm-hmm,
like, um, yeah, something that says something beyond your personality and kindness
mm-hmm,
that you feel like you need to prove. Whenever you feel like you have to
yeah.
like prove something, whether that's yeah, buying a product, a course, membership, whatever.
And I mean,
It,
just to be clear, I do think that, like it is, not feasible in reality for me, for any random woman to go to an influencer's page with, over 100,000 followers or over 50,000 followers and be like, oh, I'm just going to send them a message and let them know that I'm their friend. Like, like any friendship, like, developing friendship takes time and it takes, like, there are certain cursors that have to happen, and I know, and it's like one of those, yeah, it's a get rich quick scheme. Like, oh, let me give you money so that you see me. Like, if
right,
you,
right.
yeah, yeah, like if you are trying to,
Mhm.
and like that, like when I was doing it, I wasn't acting. I was just like, oh, I don't really need this course. I just need a new friend,
Mm,
and that's not me being honest with them.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and going back to the MLM, it's like, when you're once you stop
Hmm.
selling that product, you're not in the group anymore. Like it's
Yeah.
hard to relate and everything becomes about the network.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's such an extractive like lens. I was trying to think of the term for it before when I was talking about my brief encounter or my brief stint in with Young Living essential oils, but the I just had these glasses on that were um, extractor lenses. Like,
Hmm.
how do I maximize this interaction? Oh
Yes.
my gosh, that is
Yeah.
something that I've experienced so much over the years in and out of women's spaces. That being on the receiving end of that,
Hmm.
how can I maximize this relationship, like the max amount of
Yeah.
profit?
It's a red flag to me when I have a friend that I consider like a friend and we've had friendly interactions in person, you know. But every single interaction we have, she tries to sell me on something, right? Like
You
at the
should
end
come
of
to
hanging out,
this. You
yeah.
should totally come to this, Dipiti.
Oh, I have a new program coming out.
This would be perfect for you.
Yeah. And so, like, seeing how women treat their friends in their lives, like, is everyone in their life someone to be sold to? Like, is everyone just walking around like, oh, they have my money in their pockets, you know?
And no one is like I just want to reiterate that it's not an us versus them. Like anyone who's been in affiliate marketing or multi-level marketing, I haven't had this experience with affiliate marketing, it was more with the MLM, but I remember going to a friend's office and asking her if I could leave a bunch of essential oil rollers
Mm-hmm.
so that she could give out to her coworker. It was just like a wildly inappropriate thing to do that when I think
Mm-hmm.
about I cringe and it's like totally humiliating. But you tell yourself that these products are going to help people and you are introducing people to things that are going to be a great addition to their lives. And it's just such a lie. It's a lie that you tell yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a lie that you spread. And women offering you their stuff, like, might actually tell themselves that their program is the solution to your problem. And that's where you run into trouble.
Okay, so let me just point out the best salespeople believe what they are selling, right? Like, there's not a single woman out there that's gonna be like, oh, raise my hand, I'm a filthy snake oil salesman, like,
Yeah.
yeah, like everyone believes that they are doing the most good. And so,
And I think women don't want to see other women suffer.
yeah.
If you saw your friend struggling and you like really thought you had the solution, you
Hmm.
didn't want to see your friend suffering. Like you really might like embody this kind of like hero and project this kind of like hero onto her that like you actually do have the solution. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, just completely like projecting your frame of healing, money, quantum leaping, like whatever it is, uh, onto her. Okay, I think we should move on to number 5. This is
Yeah.
a really scary one. The group encourages, this is a really like a obvious one, like a more obvious scary one. Like the group encourages you to cut off family and friends who don't agree with everything you say, think, and believe.
And no one, like, when you first make a new friendship or when you first join a group, no one's going to be like, oh, day one, got to cut off toxic people, you know? And it starts off subtly. It starts off being like, oh, block them. Just block them from your social media. If somebody's coming up with energy that you don't like, just block them, right? And then it might move to like, oh, well, you know them, they're a friend or a family member, block their number too. Right. So you're not just blocking them on social media. Now they're like harassing you, trying to look out for you, or like, blowing up your phone or text messaging. Like, block them on your phone too. And then it gets into like, oh, you have like all of these people blocked and so then it's just like there's so much of it that you're not being told to cut off these people. It's just expected of you. You're expected, like, in order to be in the group like everyone else. No one else has family that is, toxic. No one else has toxic people in their life. And so you just do what's expected. And then, after some time passes, then you realize that everybody that you hang out with is just an echo chamber and is in the same group as you, you know? And in radical feminism, I think that one of the main radical feminist ideals is separation, right? One of the biggest ideals is separatism from men. And, I understand that that perspective is like, oh, you have to separate from the abuse to heal from it. Um, and I don't necessarily see a bunch of awesome, healed, integrated women, radical feminists walking around, right? Like I don't think it's working out the way that they say it's working out. And so yeah, like if the group as a whole, one of the values is separation, is separatism, is going into a group of women that, you've known for however long, less than 5 years, less than 10 years, like less than you've known your family, less than you've known your
Hmm.
lifelong friends, like, and then all of a sudden that's all you're hanging out with, and like when you talk about other friendships or other relationships, it's not like shamed, it's just like it's not done, and it like maybe it's just like not acknowledged when you bring it up, so you stop bringing it up, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, the biggest red flag is, and like I said, like you might not notice it at first, but if you ever realize that everyone that you are hanging out with on a day-to-day basis and everybody that you are having meetings with or like spending your time with is in the same group as you, that is a separation tactic, and that is an isolation tactic.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't want this to be confused with like having women around you who, having those friends in your life who you can be totally uncensored with, who you can,
Mm-hmm.
the sense you just like, whatever you say to them, they could never be shocked, right? Like you can go to those places in conversation, in thought experiments. That is so valuable. That is something that, I have and I
Mm-hmm.
treasure and I value so much. But living in a bubble where everyone is constantly echoing your values of that moment, by the way. Like it's like it's first of all, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it's even a sustainable thing. Even you can do it for a couple years, but chances are there are going to be some members and some women who change their mind on things. And so then what? Then what do you do, right? It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
account for people's evolution and life circumstances changing and people changing their minds. So when setting up circles or book clubs or whatever you're doing, like having guidelines is great, right? Being really clear about who the group is for and what you're doing in the group for that specific event, um, 5 week program, like whatever it is, like that is not worth speaking about. We're talking about designing a life, creating a
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle where you can eliminate or block like anyone who does not meet the criteria that you might have for like a very specific circumstance. Right? It's
So,
it's okay to like if you want to have a book club where you're only discussing books that are relevant to this one topic,
mhm.
great. That's a great way to vet and to keep the topic, keep the conversation focused and effective.
But then if that book club becomes your life and
Yeah.
you don't talk to anyone that's not in the book club, and that then everyone who's not in the book club becomes like a taboo or an enemy, like
Hmm.
that's when it becomes a red flag.
Yeah. Or the
I
way
want
that
to.
people talk, like people in the book club talk about people who are not in the book club and
Mm-hmm.
degrade those
Yeah.
people. Also, red flag.
I want to just bring up in this one, um, this idea of like community living. A pattern that I see is that women will meet each other online and then want to live in close proximity to each other. And so, and this is, like whether you're moving on to like an intentional co-ed community or a specifically like radical feminist lesbian women's land, like I would definitely talk to people who have moved off of that land before moving onto it. I would definitely talk, like, have written agreements on, like, what is allowed and what's not allowed. Are you allowed to have visitors? You know, are you allowed to have, you know, like your father come, you know, visit you, or your brother or whatever? If you are moving onto a land and, you know, maybe separating from the father, but the father isn't, or of your children, but the father isn't like abusive in any way, and the leader is like, oh, you can't be in contact with your ex while you're living on my property, like that's a red
Mm.
flag, right? Like being told who you are and are not allowed to have contact with, I that wouldn't seem like a good situation to be in. Or is the leader doing that to other people on her land? You know, are there strict rules with how you are allowed to conduct yourself? Of how your family is allowed to live, of, you know, what grocery stores you're allowed to shop from, you know. I know that there's this one women's land that doesn't want anything that's not from the co-op, and then they are also owners of the co-op, you know. And so it's like, you know, this is where it comes into like critical thinking and using discernment.
So speaking of understanding what you're getting into, like, you
Mhm.
know, number six, um, what are the financial expectations of like
Mhm.
moving to a communal land, to a communal, anything that's advertised as communal living, you know, looking out for tactics where your money might be controlled. Dipiti, you had brought up the example when we were preparing for this episode of like funneling the Social Security, which I wasn't
Mhm.
familiar with. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so there is a women's land out there that if you are getting a social security check or a disability check, you have to have it signed over to the trust. And so that the trust gets it. And you might not be qualified to be on the board. And so you're signing your checks over to the land and you're not getting it anymore. And so it's like this idea that, like, oh, the land and the women who are on the board are going to take care of you. And so you don't even need to handle your
Mm,
own money. Right. And this is same with like inheritances. I've heard of women living on women's land for, you know, a decade and then having their parent die and getting a decent sized inheritance, and the land expects it, and, you know, the
mm.
woman is expected to give it all to the land because they're a community. And so I've heard, you know, sometimes disability checks have to be signed over to another person and they can't go directly to them. And so like if you're in that situation, I would absolutely encourage you to know who, you know, like know for a long period of time the people that you're signing your checks over to, you
Mm.
know, like
Mhm.
I just like I've never seen it work. I've never witnessed a community that has complete financial control over other or over their members' monies, and it go swimmingly without drama and actually, you know, make everyone happy.
That's a really important one. Um, Number seven, every 10th word in the marketing is the word feminine, not
Feminine.
female, not woman, women, but feminine.
Mhm.
This is a red flag for me because it's vague. I don't know what feminine means to you. I don't know if you're talking about gender stereotypes. I don't know if you're talking about the way that traditional Chinese medicine might describe feminine. I don't know if you're talking about yin yang. I don't know what you mean. And I would want to get more information. Is this an anti-feminist group? Is this a kind of a pseudo trad wife group, right? I would have a lot of questions. So Yeah, I would just want to know that if that word is being used as much as it is, that it is also accompanied by explanation and description for how that translates into what is being taught or shared in
Mhm.
in the group.
I would say that that's a red flag for any ambiguous word. One of my words that I find as a red flag is transformation. They have
Mm.
transformation every 10 words, or the quantum leap, like quantum leaping, if that is being used in marketing, that's just a red flag for me.
And sovereign, and I can hold myself to this. Like I
Mm-hmm.
have used the word sovereignty, sovereign a lot, and over the past few weeks, I've like really, I don't think I've changed much from my site. So if you go to my site, you're going to see the word sovereign. But this past few weeks, I've been really trying to hold myself to this same thing because as a language, as we evolve and as you see the word over and over and over, like just like feminism, like feminism used to mean one thing. And then the 80s happened and the 90s and the 2000s. And here we are. And
Mm-hmm.
feminism could mean anything from women have dicks to, you should totally get a hysterectomy, like because you want it. And
Mm-hmm.
there should be no gate. Like, we don't know what it means. So, I like to think that when I'm using the word sovereignty on my site, women are interpreting that as like second wave feminism, decoupling from institution, women's health in women's hands. But I can't assume anymore. So yeah, I think we could throw sovereign in there too.
Definitely.
Um, Transformation. Yeah, we talked about the quantum leap. But yeah, the feminine is a really popular
Mm-hmm.
one. Yeah, I would like to see like female physiology. Like that would perk me up. I'd be like, "Oh, cool. Okay." They're talking about like something material, something measurable. I would be more
Yeah.
intrigued by that than feminine.
Yeah. In all relationships, like red flags don't mean, oh, stop and completely pull out, right? Red flags mean proceed with caution, like stop, analyze, proceed with caution. And so, as we're talking, I don't expect your listeners to like hear something we say and be like, "Oh my gosh, like I'm part of a women's circle and they have one of these red flags. I must stop
Yeah,
immediately."
it's all been a lie.
Yeah. That's not necessarily what we're
Hmm.
saying. But we both have had these moments where we have had to stop everything and realize it's all been a lie. We have both had these moments where these red flags were piling up, and then we had to stop and analyze and, reevaluate and get out.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, if you are seeing one of these red flags in your women's circle or women's communities, like it's a good thing to pause on, to question,
Hmm.
certainly. But we're not saying like, oh, stop everything and,
Right. That
ditch.
that it's all that this is a formula. Like if you ever see the word feminine repeated more than 10 times on a sales
Marketing,
page,
yeah.
then you must quit the program or whatever. No, we're not. Thank you for that for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Yes, we are encouraging you to stop, analyze what you're seeing, and proceed with some caution, with some
Mhm.
skepticism. Yeah. Number 8. You are joining a group, community, space where there are zero crones in leadership positions,
Or there's one special token crone.
or there's
Or
one special token crone.
or the one special token crone is the leader.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
There's also a women's community out there that the board is all crones and the members are all in their 20s. And that's also a red flag, right? Um,
Mm.
so I think that, the pendulum can swing a lot of like, it is, and so
Why
in
is that a red? Can you explain why that's a red flag if there's a board of crones and only members who are in their
I
20s?
think I guess it's a red flag. It's really the marketing that's the red flag. I think that if there's a board of crones and the members are all in their 20s, then like I would hope that it's like life skill sharing, or like, maybe you don't have a grandma, we'll be your grandma. Do you want to share recipes? That's one thing. But if it's a group of crones and they are talking about sexual awakening, and they're targeting women in their 20s, right? Or if they are talking about how you can earn money through sexual advances, or, things,
Mm.
yeah. So
Like
I
if there's
think,
also like a, it's like you're talking about like same-sex attracted space where
mhm,
there's this potentially sexually predatory element under the guise of like mentorship, which can
yes.
happen in a heterosexual dynamic as well, or like a male same-sex attracted dynamic, but where
Hmm.
there's this also element of like sexual awakening, sexual
Yeah.
mentorship.
I've seen this in quantum leaping business. We were just talking about the last red flag, but I have seen it in that too, of like, oh, have orgasms to make more money.
Mm, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can see where you're going with that. Right.
Hmm.
Right. Like what, and anyone who's watched actually I haven't watched it, but I'm familiar with the one taste sex cult. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
you could see, yeah, it doesn't take much to, think about how that might,
And so, yeah, the
get
red flag
tricky.
is like, if
Mm-hmm.
your mentors are all, 2, 3 decades older than who they're marketing to, and they are wanting to do orgasmic money making things, like that's probably predatory. But on the other side of the pendulum of like having like no crones in their circle, or a token crone in their circle, I think that that's a red flag, because it's a red flag for me, because it shows me they're not well rounded, and that they probably cannot keep healthy relationships. Most crones that I know just like don't have time to waste with petty drama. And so they'll choose to stay out of women's circles that are, overly consumed with petty drama.
Mm,
If they have a token crone, like, is she, like, I think that there's definitely ways to see how a person is being tokenized versus like if they are actually part of the group, if they are actually an esteemed, valuable member of
right.
the inner circle or of the decision making. Is she there just to take pictures with, or like does she actually have a say in the moral compass of the group?
Yeah. Yeah, you bring up such good points. And like what also comes to mind is like how does the leader or leaders of this group pay homage to her foremothers, right? Is there
Mm-hmm.
credit being given where credit is deserved? Or is there a sense of like, this starts with me now? How does leadership respect the women who have
Mm-hmm.
come before them?
And it is a red flag for me to think that there's anyone out there with like such an original idea that no one's taught them anything. Like, especially when we're talking about skill based, assets, like when we're taking or joining a community or learning like how to be in community, like with like actual applicable skills, like
Mhm.
who did you learn from? Who
Yeah.
are your mentors? Who came before you? Whose, torch are you getting past? And I realized that a lot of women out there are feeling abandoned by the last generation, by the people that we're following. And I think that, yeah, like if you are growing women's community or growing women's business, and you have not found women who have done it before, who have led other women before, and like you don't have their number to call and ask questions when things come up, like that puts your followers, and that puts your membership in a very risky position, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is so invaluable to have those women to call and be like, what have the other women done when this has
Hmm.
happened? Like
Yeah.
what has worked? What how has this been dealt with previously?
And even though we can like argue that online spaces are so new and like online communities are so new, like no, there is not a, 75-year-old woman out there that has had online communities for the last 30 years. Like
Yeah.
it just like no. But the interpersonal workings of communities don't really change. And so, like, I think that a lot of influencers, like being an online influencer, is a relatively new thing in the last 20 years. And so we can't really get like a crone's advice on like how to be a good online influencer. But I think that it is silly to think that women haven't been influential.
Hmm.
Right? It's silly to think that women haven't had, haven't been popular or had followers or have had a following, before the internet. And so,
Hmm.
like, a lot of problems or mistakes, or however you want to word it, that come up in women's spaces online have absolutely happened before, you
Yeah.
know, online was a thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And speaking of like what do we do when this happens and seeking counsel, how does one leave a group? How does one exit? What is the guide for how to do that?
Mhm.
How should a leader behave when a woman says, I'm walking away, or this isn't for me anymore, or I've changed my mind? Are we ready to move on to number 9?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, this is a big one. Okay, they're all big, but like this is a big one. What is the moral code of the group that you are joining? Is it secular? Is it religious? Is there no moral code? How is right and wrong determined? Right? And so it being religious, we know doesn't necessarily mean it is a green flag. Having a very strict code of conduct and a really like a clear PDF form does not mean it is a green flag. What are the principal guidelines? So first of all, like, does the group have guidelines? What are they? And do they resonate?
Mhm. I think that unfortunately, this red flag can really only be observed in time, right? Because so many groups, especially on the online places, you just click a box and you're agreeing to the, principles of the group.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, how are they enforced? I
Yes.
think is
Enforced. Yeah.
how we discern if it's a red flag or not, right? How does the group leader choose like what is right and what is wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And do they say things like, "Oh, everyone should know."
Yeah.
Like, "Oh, this is just common sense." Like, what? You weren't taught this as a child, you know? The most functional women's communities that I have been a part of, before you get to meet in the circle with the group, a leader or organizer will sit down with you and let you know what the moral code is, what the code of conduct is, right? They'll sit down with you and it can kind of, sometimes it's in a vetting situation or like, whatever. And they'll sit down with you and they'll be like, yeah, so like if you have a problem, these are the steps that we take. If you don't like something that's said, this is what you do. If you have a problem with someone, this is who you go to, If you have a problem with that person, this is the other person you go to, and that really sets women up for success. I think it's a red flag when the code of conduct is just like an online thing that you tick a box and, like who reads the terms of service anywhere. I think it's a red flag if they just don't have one. I think it's a red flag if their code of conduct is more of this is how you stay out of trouble, not a like
Mm. Like
this is
only a list of don'ts.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But then, yeah, like how, one, can you question it? And if the moral code says, this is a male free zone, and that anytime you are on video call, you shouldn't have men in the background. And then, some woman comes with a man on her screen, like how is that
Mhm.
handled? Like,
Mhm.
is it handled kindly? Are they kicked out of the group? Are they,
Mhm.
like what are the consequences of breaking those moral conducts?
Yeah, absolutely.
And another huge red flag is, do those consequences changed based on what graces they are in with leadership? So if they're in good graces with leadership, are they like, oh, you didn't do like, no, don't even worry about that. Whatever, we're gonna look
Right.
right past it.
Right.
Where if you're in like poor graces with leadership, then like, oh, that we're gonna retaliate. That's gonna get you kicked out of the group.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the biggest red flag in this one, in this under these red flags, is leadership held accountable to these moral codes, or is it just
Mm.
the followers?
Yes. 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 Thank you so much for
Mhm.
naming that. Would have forgotten that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who do they
And
apply
when,
to?
yeah, and it's like in most of these groups, leaders won't call each other out in front of just like the ordinary members or whatever. And so, what does it look like when members call out leadership? What does it look like when members call out, things that are making them feel ill, or, making
Mhm.
them feel like,
Mhm.
they might not belong? Like, how is that conducted? Is there public shaming that happens? Like if somebody says like, hey, you've had a big, revolving door of friends in this group for the last 10 years, like what's up with that? Are they shot down? Is it dismissed? Or is it like, yeah, I can see where you have a concern, let's address it?
Yeah. That we're so thank you. We're already in number 10. You just took us to number 10, which is leaders, the board, organization is not open to criticism, feedback. There is a false dichotomy. There is a kind of with me or without me. And the
Hmm.
goalpost is always moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My way or the highway. You're either with me or against me, and you can never prove your loyalty enough for me to ever know if you're with me.
Ooh, yes, that is a
You
big
know,
one. That is
yeah.
really, yeah. Yeah.
Like there are so many. This is such a big red flag. Is there are so many leaders out there that will insinuate that they don't know who they can trust, or that they don't know who's actually with them, or like they don't know which one of their employees is a mole, or like paranoia is
Yeah.
huge in.
Yeah.
And so like if you have a leader that's paranoid, that is a red flag.
Right. Or they're talking about their history of being betrayed
Hmm.
or fear of future betrayal.
Hmm.
Yeah. Huge, huge red flag. Yeah.
And oh gosh, I've totally been swept in by this, which is why I'm just like, it's a red flag. But like I've definitely been in a situation where I'm hearing a woman with, a big influence, crying and telling me about like these stories of betrayal, and how she's never had a loyal friend, or how she's never had a loyal employee, because everyone, and just story after story after story. And I'll be there with her and like holding space with her and being like, wow, this woman, she's just been so hurt and harmed, and like she just can't catch a break. And then it won't be until a few days after where I'm just like, oh, that was a very one-sided story. I wonder, like what the other side of this is like. I wonder who, what the other version of this is like.
I've heard it phrased as like this is the cost of leadership. Like
Hmm.
I remember being in certain groups and seeing the struggle of the leader or organization and fearing ever being like in a position and of any like power, any position of power or influence, because I believed the story that this is the cost, like that to be a leader is synonymous with being betrayed, backstabbed, being the center of drama, legal problems, financial problem, and I remember having this, yeah, just having these moments over the years of like, is this, do I really want, do I want to be in a position of influence? Do I want to be a woman that women come to? Do I want to have downloads on a podcast? Like what is the cost of this? And does this mean,
Hmm.
if I'm observing this in different groups and organizations, does this mean this is my going to be my fate?
Yeah,
Conflating chaos with leadership. And that's not,
literally.
we're not trying to imply that leadership is something easy, or running a successful, sustainable women's group is easy, or that we have the perfect formula. We just want women listening to apply a critical lens to the spaces that they are currently in or thinking about joining.
I have a green flag example.
Okay, great.
So I have a friend and she runs her own company. And whenever there is a disagreement or tension or anything like that between her and her employees, it is all in writing. They'll have like a Zoom call, or even if it's face to face, they will write it down like, okay, thanks for, chatting with me. This is what I got out of it. Like, this is how I interpreted our
Mm,
conversation. And then when problems occur again, she'll go back and and she has like a filing cabinet where all of like these things happen, and she's like, okay, how is this like the last time this happened, and what did we do then, and how can we make that better? And she has a team that will like that stays on top of it, that when she has tension or when she has disagreements within leadership, she takes it very, very seriously and she writes it down. And she'll sometimes, if it's a huge problem, she'll bring in a third party, to come in and help, sort it all out. And I think that that's just such a green flag, to like have a filing cabinet full of written examples of disagreements and how she followed through with them, how she solved the
mm,
problem.
yeah.
And I don't think that the opposite of that would be a red flag. I don't think that, every single businesswoman needs to like have a filing cabinet of, disagreements or anything. But she's a very type A personality. Out of all of the women's circles or women's businesses that I know of, she has the least amount of drama.
Mm. I love it. Like addressing it head on. Like it sounds like there's a lot of empathy and willingness to understand where the other person is coming from, and actually does, and an actual desire to resolve, rather than
Mm-hmm.
dispose
Deflect.
of a person,
Yeah.
Yeah, moving through conflict isn't glamorous. It's tedious and it's difficult, and it can take time. And so I love, yeah, I love that documentation and being able to refer back. I think that's wonderful. Thank you for bringing up that green flag. We're going to move into number 11, weaponizing responsibility. So a continuation actually of 10, but when you bring issues to a leader, organization, board, the criticism that you have is then flipped in a kind of a Darvo
Yeah.
tactic, where then you are made responsible for resolving the problem with your thoughts, your judgments, your beliefs, and your feelings. Sometimes this is called taking radical responsibility. Sometimes this is called owning your stuff. Sometimes, there are many ways that this is referred to. And I just want to note that, like, I do believe in radical responsibility. I don't believe in wallowing in a story that everything is constantly happening to you in your life. And I also believe that we can be victims, and people do things to other people, and it's
Mm-hmm.
really important to be able to name that But if you're noticing a pattern of deflection, Darvo, particular framework, ideology, religion is being weaponized when you bring up real issues, that is a huge red flag. And then when it is framed as a opportunity for personal growth.
Hmm. Yeah. Like, oh, so like the situations that I can picture in my head is like, and I'll just use I statements for this was like, oh, I have a problem with how you as a leader are conducting this XYZ. And then it's like, oh, you only have a problem because of it, it's personal. It's in your head, It's like you have a problem with this because you're not evolved enough to see it my way. You're not healed enough to see how this is actually helpful. You're not, wherever it is. You're not where I am, and so you can't see it, right?
Mm. Right. The
And
reason for the
then
problem is because you can't see the full picture.
yeah, yeah. And then it's like, oh, well, now this is such a good opportunity for us to get into some transformational work for you. Like when's the first time you felt this conflict? Where's the first time what in your history makes this not okay? Right?
A
And
complete
then
deflection. Like the original
mhm.
problem is just becomes completely irrelevant.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And and I see it in a few groups, of everything from like, oh, I sold you this course to have this result, and you didn't get this result because you didn't work hard enough,
Mm.
right? But if you did get that result, it's because I gave it to you. So if it goes
Mm.
positively, it's because I'm the best leader in the world. And if it goes negatively, it's because you just didn't self reflect good enough. So it's like this for perpetual deflectment of like I have like I can't make you do anything. You are your own person. So even though you pay me to for my advice, I still can't make you do anything. And if you do something that messes up your life because you thought that I told you to do that, that's a lie. I didn't really actually tell you to do anything like that. You just
Mm.
need more personal responsibility. You just need to take more responsibility for your own decisions.
Mm.
You know, oh, this thing that I told you to do really worked out. You should pay me more money so that I can, do a better job of telling you what to do. And so it's like this constant loop of everything right in your life is because you paid me money, and everything wrong in your life is because you haven't paid me enough.
Ooh, creepy.
Yeah. And anyone who says otherwise is just a disgruntled student that doesn't know what they're talking about, and I'm going to infantilize them and call them stupid. You know, oh, something we haven't talked about yet. If the leader or leaders of your group is calling members names like stupid or disillusioned or blah, 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 like not
Anything
even,
degrading, yeah.
yeah,
Any
not
any
even like
ex-member, if they're creating
not
a,
even
yeah,
ex members, but current members.
yeah.
If your leader is calling current members names, that is a red flag. It's definitely still a red flag if they're calling ex members names. But if they are like getting up on stage, or like getting up on, their camera and being like, oh, everyone who's a part of this group that isn't here right now is stupid. Like everyone who has been here in the past but isn't now is XYZ. Like that's a red flag.
Yeah. Yeah. That brings us to our final red flag, number 12. Group members, community members, land dwellers go from being celebrated to isolated. So, how are women viewed who are no longer in the group? Are they still cared about? Are they communicated with? Or are their names never spoken and it's like they never even existed.
Mhm.
But yeah, and are the women who have left used as examples of what not to do
Mhm.
and how not to behave? And is it just a real kind of a contrast where you see a woman being propped up and yeah, as you said, celebrated and then just poof.
And this is, I said it already, and I'd like to just reiterate. It is so important that before joining a women's community, talk to past members. Find past members that are no longer in the group for whatever reason, and see what their experience was like,
Yeah.
especially after or especially before moving onto
Mm-hmm.
someone's land. Like,
Mm-hmm.
talk to people who have left that land. Why did
Yeah.
they leave? What, like, are they in good standing with them still? Is anyone in good standing with them still? Are there any members that have left that are still in good standing? If there is a large group of disgruntled past members, like, was it a one-time incident, or do you get it like every few years? Especially, I think that most women with the groups that we're specifically talking about, like, will follow these groups for a few years, maybe, or a few months online, and then, kind of be swayed into joining.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so, like, do you see patterns of special mentions on Instagram, or, special collaborations where, like, the leader is like, oh my God, this woman, she's my soul sister and I love her so dearly, a dear, dear friend of mine. And, like, is that person actually a dear, dear friend, or have they only known each other for a few months? Like, that's a red flag to me, like, knowing that, like, these two women have literally just met a few months ago online, and now, they're referring to each other like sisters, like they have a deep, deep relationship. And not to say that I don't think you can form deep relationships in a few months, but I think that it's a marketing manipulation
Yeah,
at that
if your
point.
main selling point is sisterhood and then
Yeah.
you see them on retreats together and you see
Hmm.
them half naked together and you see
And
them
then
healing together
yeah.
and
And then all of a sudden they disappear and they're never spoken of again. And maybe when somebody asks about it, they are shot down and been like, oh, it's personal. You can't ask me about my personal life. Or like, oh, that, like, I'm trying to keep that separate, like, and it getting around about excuse, basically, and
yeah,
not getting a direct answer. Like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I'm thinking about like my first like big, kind of when I left like the mainstream birth world and then I was in a 2-year fertility awareness teacher training program. Like I was kicked out for something that like I couldn't have possibly have vetted for. Actually, I did
Hmm.
like for anyone who doesn't know the story, like I had already become, adopted like a radical feminist analysis, a radical feminist lens before I started this program. And I emailed the head of the program and I said, listen, I have this lens. Like I use the words woman and mother and I will not erase women in my language. And she said, that's fine. And I joined the group, and it wasn't fine. And I was reported for being violent and all these things. This is an online group where I was reported for being violent because the words I used were anatomically correct. And when I'd give PowerPoint presentations, I would say really disturbing words like vulva and vagina and woman and mother and breastfeeding. And that really upset a couple women who were exhibiting like dissociative behaviors, like thinking they were stuck in the wrong body and wanting to be called opposite sex pronouns and yeah, so I was kicked out for something that I couldn't have possibly like had never kind of like I really don't believe that this the founder of this program, the leader of this company had a history of plucking women out very liberally. I think she found herself in a socio-political climate that was uncharted, where she, disproportionately sided with this false, minority of adult men who think they're stuck in the wrong bodies, and the fictional trans child. So I found myself in this really particular situation, and that is something that I knew women who had done that program.
Hmm.
I knew many women who had done that program, and it had a very, very good reputation. And I still found myself in a like kind of a you mean you can't make this shit up. It was just a ridiculous scenario in which, the final hurrah, and I think I should retell the story in another episode, but where I found myself in a confrontation with my cohort, and the leader of this program had hired a gender specialist, who was a psychologist based in, I think, the state of Washington, who then challenged me to a role play in which she played an autogynephilic man who was desperate to come into my women's circle, and then I confronted him and I said, "Sorry, sir, like this is a group for women," and then end scene, a couple hours I got kicked out. Like that is such an unethical, like freakish
Hmm.
situation to be in. And I don't know that I really could have vetted for that, really. So that is all to say that there are going to be situations that you may encounter that we have not covered in these 12 red flags, and we cannot anticipate like what kind of new fad we will be dealing with, or fake grassroots movement that we will see pop up, that you didn't even know you had to vet for, some kind of
Yeah.
strict ideological framework, language policing, et cetera, et cetera.
And I think that it comes down to, like the way that we were able to come up with these red flags is through personal experience. And
Yeah.
the way and it's all, hindsight,
Yes.
2020 hindsight, and we got here through critical thinking. We got here through being able to talk openly without being scared, and and question, like, even if we weren't able to question, leadership of different groups with either, other relationships in our lives or with each other, we were able to like ask questions and be like, wait, is this normal? Like,
Yeah.
is this moral? Is this actually the ethics that I want to follow and want to be branded with, essentially? Is this, are making these decisions really advancing my life, and advancing women's lives, or are like the things that I'm participating in maybe harming more women than helping? Those aren't fun questions to ask yourself when you're supposed to be having like a good time, in women's festivals or in women's communities. And so, yeah, I think I want to just end with, if if you're even scared to ask questions, it's time for self-reflection. If you're scared to, even like, if you were scared listening to this episode, or like even by the title of the episode, and you've made it here to the end, I am so proud of you. And even, it takes time. It takes time to integrate all of this. It takes time to open your mind to new possibilities and other understandings. And so, yeah, I'm so proud of you. And there's probably a long way to go, but if you've made it this far, you've come so far already.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Dipiti, for all your wisdom and sharing in your experience. Like I said previously, there's no one I wanted to do this episode other than you, and we are continuing this conversation. So if you want to hear everything that we're talking about after we've taken a bit of a break and stretched our legs and gotten a snack, you can find that bonus content by subscribing to my Substack, which is linked in the episode show notes. Will also be linking ways to be in touch with Serendipity. And yeah, we look forward to hearing what you thought about this episode, what revelations you came to, what you disagree with. We're here for all of it. So thank you for, yeah, sticking around. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or family member who needs to hear this content. And if you do share it on social media, don't forget to follow and tag me at Whose Body Is It? So until next time.